Why was it that Palpatine gave the clone troopers specific orders not to kill certain Jedi during Order 66? And what does the brand new novel Rise of the Red Blades say about Sidious, the Inquisitors, and more? Revealing that Sidious had his eye on other Jedi, not just Anakin, before Order 66. When the Jedi Purge was initiated, nearly every Jedi from across the stars died at once. Their numbers were reduced from just over 10,000 to a little over 100, with roughly 1% of the Jedi surviving, and most of that number were promptly cleaned up by Lord Vader, or they went into hiding, while some of them ultimately became Inquisitors and embraced the dark side. Speaking of which, the majority of the Inquisitors actually turned to the dark side right around the time of the Great Purge rather than after, which is a new revelation thanks to the canon novel. Previously, we were led to believe that many of the Inquisitors were turned after the Purge and not beforehand, but now we know that Palpatine had other plans. While most all of the Jedi within the Order were shot down without mercy, there would be a select handful of Jedi that were actually spared from their fiery deaths by Palpatine directly in a mysterious new order. In the new canon Star Wars novel Inquisitors Rise of the Red Blade, we get a very personal view of the Jedi who would become an Inquisitor, one particular later in her life. In this story, she would become one of these select few Jedi selected by Palpatine to be spared, with the clones given a brand new order, just as they were ordered not to shoot down Anakin. So what exactly made Palpatine look for these specific Jedi? What was his criteria? And what are the consequences of this new reveal that has again changed Order 66? The moment that Sidious executed Order 66, no time could be wasted. The only way to effectively take down the entire Jedi at once was to catch them completely off guard. This was why Sidious had wisely decided against setting up a hard date for the Purge. Rather, he let the events unfold naturally, and jumped only when the opportunity presented itself in the right moment. Palpatine knew better than anyone that those perceptive with the Force would be able to sense the catastrophe that was about to occur, and while most Jedi felt a sense of foreboding about the future, they weren't able to pin exactly what or who this hidden enemy was, and this is exactly what Palpatine counted on. In the novel The Rise of the Red Blades, we learned that Order 66 was only a piece of the many things that had to come together at once. Once Skywalker turned to the dark side, Sidious didn't bother training him for a few days or weeks. Action needed to be taken immediately. While Operation Nightfall was taking place alongside Order 66, the droid factories and units all had to be shut down. Palpatine had to give his speech to the Senate and proclaim himself Emperor, and the clones had to round up the Jedi that Palpatine desired to be Inquisitors, with a new part of Palpatine's plan being revealed: an army of Darksiders at the ready to hunt down the Jedi. In the novel, it is revealed that Palpatine was keeping an eye on Anakin, but also other Jedi that he formed a strong relationship and bond with. One of these Jedi that Palpatine had an eye on went by Escat, a Jedi who was becoming disillusioned with the Order, but didn't have the confidence to leave the Order outright. Palpatine could sense this, and would prey on these type of Jedi, seducing them to the dark side by subtly implanting more poisonous thoughts into their already conflicted minds. Escat in particular was one such Jedi who genuinely felt like her power, skill, and talents were not being utilized by the Jedi properly. The High Council made her feel unappreciated and trapped, and the young Jedi always felt like she could do more, but was consistently prevented from reaching the full heights of her power. This resulted in her feeling as though she had to keep her abilities squashed down and hidden, as she would put it, believing that the true strength in her power was something that the Jedi were afraid of. She could not be her true self, because anytime she opened up to some of her close friends, they would encourage her to all follow the Jedi way, follow the code, and keep the Jedi path. This type of tone-deaf reasoning pushed her farther and farther into seclusion, and it didn't help that her master was always very hard on her, and there was a whole plot involving her birth and her true mother that was covered up by the Jedi, with the Order deciding to lie to her about her true origin. She grew disillusioned and felt alone until she met Supreme Chancellor Palpatine. Palpatine spoke to her kindly, praised her skill, and lavished her in compliments about her work on a specific mission that the High Council deemed to have been a disappointment, but where Palpatine saw power. From this point forward, Escat began to mentally turn against the Jedi. She continued to hide her feelings more and more, and there was even a moment when a Jedi friend of hers was in mortal danger, and yet Escat refused to lend a hand in order to help, when she certainly could have, deeming the Jedi unworthy of her great power. All of these emotions began to compound with a sudden allure and desire to turn to the dark side, the darkness whispering to her like never before. The young Jedi eventually discovered a Sith shrine during a mission, as she decided to lie to her Jedi superior about the shrine that she had found, keeping it a secret to herself. It had appeared beautiful to her and spoke to her on a deep level, and she did not want the Jedi Order to destroy or desecrate such a sacred place, a place where the Force truly spoke to this young Jedi. Later down the line, she began having dark and intrusive thoughts, and during her knighting ceremony, she chuckled to herself about how funny it would be if Mace Windu's hand had slipped while he was cutting off a Padawan's braid, instead cutting off one of her Leku instead. Escat was frightened by these changes that she saw within herself, but soon she began to doubt the Jedi's claims that the dark side was dangerous at all. The Jedi mentioned that falling to the dark side sounded more like a distant event that happened to other people and not a true threat to anybody at all. A story that the Jedi would tell children to keep them in line. All of these ideas and thoughts came to a brutal head during Order 66, when her clone trooper battalion turned on her and her friends. They gunned down one of the Jedi with her mercilessly, but then ceased fire when they approached this young Jedi, not choosing to fire upon Escat after it was revealed that there were specific orders to keep her alive. Her and her friend were standing there as the captain of the platoon would hold up a comlink where he played a transmission straight from Sidious himself. Lord Sidious, who personally addressed Escat and invited her to stop denying herself and what she truly wanted. Having already felt the mass death in the Force from all of the Jedi from across the stars, Escat immediately knew that the Jedi were gone, and that the galaxy was moving on, and she didn't intend to join the Order in its grave. So then, in a final test, she betrayed her friend, a friend of hers who she had admitted that she had loved, all to prove her loyalty to the Sith. Escat left him for dead at the hands of the clones and embraced the dark side fully, as her companion called her name and screamed out to her. The new Inquisitor remorselessly joined the clones, who took her back to see Sidious. What make the revelations in this book so important to the new canon, though, is the fact that Sidious not only carefully cultivated his relationship with Anakin, but also other Jedi who he saw promise in. We know the same can be said for the Grand Inquisitor, who was once a temple guard and also presumably turned to the dark side before Order 66, with the Grand Inquisitor noting that he hated Jocasta Nu, the Jedi librarian, because he believed she hoarded knowledge and power for herself. We also know that Palpatine approached the Jedi Master Proset Dibs, who had been incarcerated during the Clone War, a master who had attempted to kill Windu early on in the war because they did not believe that this was the true path of the Force. It were these Jedi that Palpatine had in mind to be the first wave of the Grand Inquisitorius. These were the Inquisitors that turned and did not need to be tortured or broken. They were broken already. Something important though, and according to Sidious himself, this grand idea of the Inquisitorius ultimately underperformed. Vader was the man that would execute most of the Jedi during Order 66, and Sidious would find himself repeatedly embarrassed and disappointed by the Inquisitors, this causing Sidious to even say that he had regretted making them. But this fact does not negate the important canon additions to Palpatine's story, and a better idea of what his grand plan looked like. But now, my friends, what are your thoughts on this? And what are your thoughts on the fact that Palpatine carefully cultivated relationships with other Jedi, not just Skywalker? Thank you again for visiting the channel today, and may the Force be with you.